So as many of you probably are aware, January 1st of this year I started a new web shop with a lot of scale modeling supplies. This web shop is called the scalemodelingchannel.com, or TSMC.Shop for short. So upstairs I have my workspace, and downstairs I have the warehouse for the shop with all of the stock and products for this. Now specifically for this video I'm going to be focusing on splash paints and the way that that is organized in my warehouse. When they arrive, they come in a box of 4, 2 next to each other and 2 behind each other, and that takes up quite a lot of space as they are exactly the same paint and don't really need to be stacked or put next to each other. I could just half that and put them behind each other. Now you could just do that without a box and therefore quite quickly lose some tidiness and also some organization. So what I wanted to do was make some new boxes for this to stack them 4 behind each other. Well, not stack them, just put 4 of them behind each other and not have 2 of the same colors next to each other, and therefore have a lot more space on the shelf, or at least a lot more colors on one shelf, and therefore freeing up some space on the other shelves. Now luckily Longer3D reached out to me as they wanted to promote their new Ray5 laser engraver and cutter, and they wanted to send it out to me to see what I could do with it. It arrived in a couple of parts, needed a little bit of assembly, and that was pretty quickly sorted. Then I moved it downstairs into the warehouse onto a table and also a sacrificial piece of wood, and then started playing with it. Now there is no auto homing system on this with sensors. You just need to put it in place, and that is the new homing position. So if you put it in the center, that will be it, and if you put it against the stops on both ends, that is the standard homing position. And to make sure that the level is at the correct height, you need to place the piece that you want to cut and then this small sort of leveling block on top of it, then lower the laser on it and tighten it, and that has the exact distance it needs to be for the perfect cut. Now in this case I'm using Lightburn. This is not a sponsored software. I paid for this to create some files. I simply just drew up some shapes for a box that I want to cut out. The blue lines are for a full cut to go through the material, and the red ones are simply just to score the material, so I have a sort of folding line. In Lightburn you can create a couple of different layers with different settings to them. The red line is simply for scoring the material and not going all the way through, so I just have it set at 1 pass and 900 millimeters a second and full capacity of the laser at 100%. Then the blue lines itself, they need to be actually cut all the way through. So I have that set at 2 passes to cut through the material, and depending on what material you need, you will need to change these settings as well. One important thing, this is a laser. You don't want to look into it. It has a small protective cover around the laser itself, but it is always advised to wear the glasses as well so you don't damage your eyes. The big plus point to this laser is that it actually comes with a small control screen, so you don't have to have it connected to your computer with a wire. You could do that, but you could also just use an SD card and therefore have it pretty much wireless from your computer, which is my preferred preference as I don't want to have it next to my computer. I don't really have the space for it, and I don't always want to have my computer there at the same time. So with the SD option, it's a lot easier just to have it in the place that you want it to be. Now the other cool thing is that it actually has the option when you select the file to do a sort of frame around it, so you actually know where the material needs to be placed, and therefore you will pretty much never miss a single piece or go outside of the piece itself and have it exactly where you need it to be. Now on top of the sacrificial piece of wood, I have a piece of metal. That is so simply it doesn't cut through the metal and burn the wood underneath, and therefore doesn't really mess it up all that much. From a previous project I had quite a lot of cardboard boxes left, so that is what I used to cut my new boxes for the splash paints array. Now I just framed it out again to make sure that the piece was exactly aligned, and then started the first cut. Now of course it wasn't correct the first time around. I needed to adjust the file a little bit because I made some stupid mistakes on where some tabs and what length some pieces needed to be, and also the material didn't cut all the way through on all of the pieces, so I needed to adjust the settings there as well. just to go a little bit slower and make the cut a little bit deeper. But then again, on a different piece of cardboard, these settings could not work, so you do need to play and test around with it yourself to see which settings work. Now in this case, along this lip here, the cut didn't go through as there was a piece of tape on both sides, and that stopped it from cutting it all the way. Once I figured out the settings, I cut out a couple more of these boxes and then could simply just start the folding process. So as you can see along these lips and the center lines, they were not cut all the way through, so that is a nice folding line, and the outer edge of course is completely cut through. The pieces here are perfectly aligned in the center, and you can just fold the first piece on top of it, repeat the same on the back, glue it all together, and you're left with a box. Repeat this process a couple more times, add some labels, and then you have them stacked. So previously, when they were in the splash boxes themselves, which look quite nice, they were about 12 pieces wide on one shelf, and now with the new boxes I can fit 19. Now there are some paints that require 2 paints for one set, so I needed to create a new box for that as well. Simply just made the original design a bit wider so 2 pieces could fit next to each other, exported it to the SD card, put the SD in the machine, and started cutting. That process of course was repeated a couple more times as well. Simply just fold and glue the boxes, add some labels, and bam, that is organization. Now I simply just need to repeat that process just a couple more times to do the rest, but in the meantime I figured I'd try another project as well. So on the packing table I have some rolls with stickers for on the kits, the boxes, and all the other products, and also just some extra stickers for you guys to receive with your orders. And I wanted to create a custom holder for those as well, as normally they would just lay around on the bench, be quite messy, and not look all that good. And while I had the laser out anyway, I drew up another super intricate design, moved that to the cutter again, and cut it simply out. I tried a couple of pieces, had some tests, had some fails, and eventually worked it out until I found the way that I wanted it to do for the smaller roll. Now this simply just cuts through some pieces, and again with the other boxes, some are just engraved, so they act as a nice folding line, but don't go all the way through. This again is also assembled in a similar way. Just fold up some of the flaps, add some glue, and it holds itself together. The design for the smaller one has now been perfected, and I wanted to try a bigger piece as well, just to try out the full capacity of the actual laser, which is 40 by 40 centimeters. So in this case I just scaled it up about 2.5% or 250% so that it fits the bigger roll, put a bigger piece of cardboard underneath. This one was a bit thicker, so I actually had to run the exact program twice to cut through it and leave me with a nice perfect cut. Now this didn't fit on the actual surface fully, so I did cut off the front and rear tab. These will be glued on anyway on the other tabs and flaps, so that isn't a real big problem. And once that was said and done, of course these were assembled both and now look a lot cleaner on the bench, as I had shown you previously. So as you can see, the laser can cut through the cardboard, it can cut through various other materials as well, but there are different settings for that, so that is all up to the material you want to cut. But it can't only cut, it can also engrave and sort of transfer images. So I created another box that I have absolutely no use for whatsoever, but I did want to add my logo to it just to see what it was capable of and the amount of detail that it can actually capture on this small of a scale. First, it simply just cuts out through all the edges and lines that it needs to do for the box itself to be created, and then with a lot of flashing lights it's going to be engraving the logo itself as well, so be aware. Also, of course, if you're interested in one of these lasers, I will be leaving links in the description down below, and if you want to know more about them, I will be leaving the contact information to Longer3D too, so you can contact them and ask them your specific questions if you need more information. With the engraving completed, let's have a look at the logo itself. Now it is a pretty small logo. I could have used a banana to show you the scale, but my finger is just as useless, so I figured I'd show you that too. And then again, just take out a ruler for the European guys with a 2.5 centimeter diameter, and that is about an inch as well, so that gives you a bit more of a reference. All of the small details have been captured in this logo pretty well, and is a pretty high resolution too, so that is really impressive.